call to order the City Council meeting for February 24th, 2020. Before we begin, is there anybody else here that has a birthday on February 29th that I missed? Okay, good. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Hoffman?
Here.
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. Tonight's invocation will be read or be given by Reverend Sylvester, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all please stand. And if you'll come forward to the microphone. And before you begin, I want you to slowly tell me your last name, because I could never say it.
Okay. My name is Sylvester Onye Achonam, simply meaning the son of Achonam. My father is Achonam, and then I am the son of Achonam.
I like Reverend Sylvester, sorry. Oh, you're getting out of me.
Or you can call me Father O.
Okay.
Father O.
Father O.
So our invocation is taken from Psalm 127. The psalm says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watch over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain." In acknowledgement of the divine providence of our existence, in acknowledgement of the divine presence of our city, in acknowledgement of the divine providence of our being, we offer praise to God the Creator, God the Sustainer, and God the Redeemer. Amen.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the motion summary. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Would you like to do them together or separate for the work session?
We'll do them separate since we didn't have full councils.
Approval of the motion summaries of the regular meeting and joint meeting of council held on February 10th, 2020 as recorded and transcribed.
Move for approval. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Farrell. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Abstain.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
And approval of the motion summary of the work session meeting of council held on February 3rd, 2020 as recorded and transcribed.
Approval. Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Farrell. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. If you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary of the Finance Committee meeting held on August 19th, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item B, resolution number 20-17, a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Delaware Morrow Mental Health and Recovery Services Board.
Is that date correct?
Mm-hmm.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
Move for approval of the consent agenda. Second.
Motion by Mr. Farrell, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, and public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to committee reports. Mr. Jones?
I have none tonight, Mayor.
Let's see this way. Ms. Keller?
HPC meets Wednesday. We have a lot of exciting cases on our agenda, one of them being the hotel is back, so I'm looking forward to that.
Very good.
Give you a report when it's over.
Okay. Mr. Houghton?
I have no committee reports.
Okay. Mr. Farrell?
Shade Tree Commission meets tomorrow, but still not there yet.
Okay. Mr. Holmgren?
And Finance met on February 11th. We went over and reviewed our historical performance, 2019, and January reports. And most of our time was spent discussing transportation funding options. And we elected to move that on to council as a whole. And hopefully we'll talk about that at our March work session.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Tomorrow I have a tax incentive review yearly meeting at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Okay, we'll do director updates. Susie Daly, our Chief Information Officer.
Good evening. My son almost made it to the leap year. He was born, his birthday's Friday, so. I drew the short straw, so I get to go first this year. So I'm here to give you an update on the projects that we've started in 2020 in IT. So the first one is the ERP project that's kicked off. We gave it a name, Boost, Building on Opportunities for Streamlined Technologies. The ERP, the Enterprise Resource Planning Software, is to align all of the departments together. Our mission is to transition from our legacy software, which is CMI, to the Tyler Enterprise System as quickly as possible, efficiently as possible, provide proper training, limit disruption, and maintain day-to-day operations. We kicked off on February 6th with our planning meeting with the steering committee, and we had a shareholder or a stakeholder meeting with other city employees to engage interest and to introduce our Boost project. The first phase is for the financial system, and that should be completed by the end of the year. So we'll be
Okay,
ready.
IT, fix this TV then, would you?
It worked earlier.
It looks like it's coming
Hang
on.
on 1 second, because nobody in the audience can see what you're talking about.
It's not coming on.
There we go.
Yeah,
Okay,
see, I
thank you.
fixed it.
Thank you. Good job.
I just needed to give it a boost. So that's our first project that we're working on. It's going pretty well so far. The second one is called Delaware. It is a civic engagement platform app that citizens can put on their phone for free. They can download it on the Apple Store or Google Play. It should be available in the next couple months. We're going through testing right now, so we're going to get our, you can see what it looks like a little bit, but they'll be able to report potholes, tell us about street lights. All of that will go to the correct department that needs to deal with it, and so it gets dealt with more quickly. The next one is the intranet. So we have started this project along with Lee and his team, Lee and Dale, and right now we have the home. There's a city website connection into it for the employees. We have a human resources site and then a facilities directory. We're opening up to all of the different departments if they'd like to have a page, or they can use just kind of a square on the home page to communicate information. So it's a big endeavor. It's to try to make sure that because we have so many facilities and departments everywhere, we wanted to try to make sure that people have one place to go to get information so we can communicate things. We'll also have a page for our ERP system too. So as we get moving on that or other projects, we can add pages as needed. And the last one is the police RMS that gets kicked off. Is it tomorrow? So we'll be helping with that too.
Just let them know what RMS stands for.
RMS is Record Management System, and we've worked together. The police chief did a really good job incorporating the county and some other municipalities and putting together the CAD system The CAD system is like the 911 calls, so those will integrate with our records management system. It'll help the police in Delaware and other cities that are on the same system catch the bad guys quicker. So we're excited about that. Does anyone have any questions other than why isn't the TV working?
Anybody have any questions for Susie?
No?
Well,
Thank
I
you.
think you do a great job.
Thank you very
I
much.
really appreciate you.
it.
Thank you. Okay, let's move down to item 10. I'm just afraid item 9 is going to take a little bit longer than 20 minutes, so if you'll read item 10 into the record. Didn't mean to confuse you.
No, I'm sorry. Ordinance number 20-01, an ordinance levying a $5 motor vehicle license charge as authorized by section 4504.173 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Pursuant to direction we received from council at the last meeting, we have made some changes to the ordinance to provide a little more specificity regarding what the money is going to be used for, in particular safety improvements. And I know this was the direction that Vice Mayor Schaefer provided. I think the rest of council concurred with that. So what's before you tonight is the ordinance with those changes. We're also obviously continuing the public hearing. I don't know if there's anybody from the public, but we obviously welcome to hear from them. Again, this is a increase in the permissive fee that the city is allowed to charge by virtue of the fact that the legislature, state legislature, made changes last year that allowed communities to do this. So that's what's before you tonight. It would not go into effect. It would go into effect for the license year 2021. So most people would not be impacted until 2021, unless you decided to renew your license early, your plates early in later this year.
Any questions for staff on the changes? Is there anyone in the audience that had any concerns on this or comments on this particular one? Okay. Do you want to take it to another reading?
I think if everybody's okay with it, I think we'll be, my main concern is just that this is directed towards traffic safety, which I think the
Yeah.
language is clear that it is, and I think it justifies the additional fee. This is our third reading, right? So I'll move to approve ordinance 20-01.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
No.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. We can go on down
Dave's
to
13.
item 13. You'll read this from the record.
Ordinance number 20-07, an ordinance approving a preliminary development plan request for the Delaware General Health District for a new office building at 470 South Sandusky Street on approximately 9.4 acres on property zone POI, Planned Office Institutional District.
Mr. Eflin?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is for a preliminary development plan for the Delaware General Health District. And as the planning director, I'm pleased to see a use on this particular property, the old Jenkins property, that I think is compatible with the residential neighborhood around it. Obviously, the city has been working on this property for quite some time with respect to code enforcement. In fact, we took down one of the original buildings on this site. The original home still exists in the back, but appreciative of the partnership with the General Health District and their need to consolidate operations as we grow in our city and our county. And I think they've looked all over, and they've elected so far to stay really within the heart of our community. That's great. So I will present this quickly to you. I'm sure you're all familiar with the documents and the site. It is almost a 9.5-acre site that fronts South Sandusky Street and has an access point back to Magnolia Drive as well. It is on planned office institutional, which allows the health district's use. Aerial photograph, should we need it, you can see the original house, the large parking field, and the structure that we took down with some grant funds was in this location. So the proposed site plan to comply with the deep setbacks required of the POI district and to try to get a rectangular shaped building to meet the size requirements of the health district for the growing community really requires to set the building back over 500 feet plus from Sandusky Street, and then significant setbacks from the side setback in the rear as well. Basically putting it in the middle of the back portion of this site. The driveway currently is in this location, would be moved to a little bit north on the site. This would be removed, would lead you into about a 214 space parking lot split in two pieces. The front of the building would face South Sandusky Street, but given the height and given the setback, you're not going to see a whole lot of it. Of course, stormwater management is required, and this is where a pond would be. There would be a connection for emergency access only out to Magnolia Drive. We've had cases in the past in this area where the residents have clearly indicated they don't want a public street connection or direct connection to Magnolia to keep the residential feel of that street and that neighborhood. But our emergency services would have two ways in and out of this property. At Planning Commission, we spent some time talking primarily about the perimeter landscaping that's required under our code. This perimeter is, give or take, about a quarter mile or so worth of perimeter on their site, which is pretty significant. However, our code does require particularly landscaping for headlights around the parking lot and drive aisles, which are primarily located on the north side. And it does require some screening around the south side and then wrapping around to this area as well. And I think the focus of the discussion wasn't really if the health district was going to put in the screening, or if they wanted to put in the screening, they want to do all that, and they want to get out with the neighbors and talk to them about screening and other things in their project. But it was more a question of the timing of it. Our code does require, and again, this is preliminary, so we have some more work to do with the applicant should you approve this tonight. And at final, we would come back with any kind of timing requirements. But I think their request would be to see if there's a way we can work out maybe with them as staff a condition that requires, and it may be a couple of phases of landscaping here, but requires the landscaping to go within a reasonable period of time. So if council has any suggestions or ideas or comments relative to that, I think it would be helpful moving into the final development plan portion of this process, again, assuming you approve this tonight. Your planning commission did recommend unanimous approval. Appreciate Sheila and Pat. They're here tonight, and they've been following this process, and they're a professional team all the way through. Dave's here as well. So we appreciate everybody's help and conscientious effort in this regard. I know one of the things the health district wants to do, they've gotten out to the neighbors and they want to do that some more, but they're probably better able to speak to that than I am as well. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Dave? Would the applicant like to come forward? If you can please state your name and address for the record.
Sheila Hiddleston, Health Commissioner, Delaware General Health District. The health district's located 1 through 5 West Winter Street.
Pat Laney, Health Board member.
So we would also be happy to answer any questions. We also want to thank Dave and his team. They've been very, very helpful. I tell him all the time, you know, give me a communicable disease. This is way beyond my pay grade. We have, obviously, as a landscaping, we do want to do a lot of landscaping, but it is very a large property. We have been working with the neighbors. The neighbors do not appear to be very concerned. There is already fencing there that had to be repaired. We actually received several nice emails thanking us for taking care of the property better than it has been taken care of for many, many years. We took down some fencing that was unsafe. What we'd like to do is do that in phases, take care of the front parking lot. We don't really want to put too many buffers or anything in the back in the parking lot itself because that'll be where deliveries and things are made. Our clinics, we only have 2 clinics that go until 7 o'clock at night. And then we have 1 board meeting a month that typically is over by 8. All of those folks would be in the front parking lot. They wouldn't be in the back. So we don't anticipate any problems with the lighting. We would like to, we've already talked a little bit with the neighbors and get their permission and their blessing, so to speak, to do that in phases and be able to bring that back to you all. Our understanding is this could cost us an additional $500,000. And as you all know, we are a public entity. We do have a levy, but levy dollars cannot be used for this building. And so the money is, our budget is very, very tight. So to add an additional $500,000 will create an issue for us to be able to do that. So if the city is willing to allow us to do that in phases, it would be greatly appreciated. Our staff are very excited. I think our community is excited. We have really outgrown the place that we are right now, and just trying to fit everything that we're trying to do for the community. It's very hard. We have 80 people who work in that building, which may be a bit of a surprise to some people that we have that many. We will obviously be very cognizant of the neighbors and the parking. As Tom is aware, since the health district moved to its 1 West Winter site, we have always not parked in the immediate parking. Most of our staff park down West Winter, down past on the east side of Winter, down past the library. No one parks in that block because we're not supposed to. And so we are very strict with that with our staff. So whatever we need to do down there, we definitely want to do it. But we do ask for some understanding that another $500,000 is a lot of money. I don't know if there are other questions anybody has. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to quickly mention, I know that our staff has been working closely on the planning phase of this, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the health district's attentiveness to making sure we've gotten to this point. I think the other thing I want to point out is the health district is a very important institutional employer, and while we didn't want to see them leave the downtown, they're not moving far from it, and as Director Eflin pointed out, that part of the city can benefit, I think, from this type of development. So while we're kind of disappointed you're leaving the downtown, you are leaving a large building that I know our economic development director is working closely with Sheila and her staff on the reuse of that building, because that's an important part of our downtown. I should point out that there's about 80 spaces that will be freed up as a result of their moving down to South Sandusky. But this is a great project. In terms of the $500,000, I don't know, Jim, is that a
I think it's just due to half mile or so around the perimeter of the site. Now, we'll have to, as we get in the final development plan, we'll have to sharpen our pencil, really do a full code review and what's required and the timing of that with them, so. But that's in broad brush terms, that's accurate.
It's been quite a project for us. I mean, we've been undergoing studies about whether we could sufficiently rehab the existing building to accommodate our needs, but there's always the parking problem there. That turned out to be pretty cost prohibitive for us to modernize that building. So we've been looking for probably about 2 years to find a site, and found that this was available within our budget. So we were pleased to be able to have this location, because it not only continues to serve the city of Delaware, but it puts us right off the 42 interchange, which makes it more accessible to the patients and people that come to us from the southern part of southern part of the county. So we're excited to be able to proceed with this site as we go through the process, and appreciate everything the city's doing to help us with this.
This was discussed at planning, and it was unanimously, everybody supported it, and we understood that about the issue with the landscaping. I think they were a little surprised at what we anticipated it might cost, so.
Our builder designer, they are developing the plan for us, so we would have the entire plan done to take to planning. It would just be the request to be able to do that in stages.
Yeah, I think as long as the people around it aren't worried about it, then I don't see why we should be worried either.
Okay, do you want to take it to another reading, or do you want to? You guys?
Let's say, Madam Mayor, on behalf of the Health District, we were looking to seek passage this evening from council, if you're so inclined, just because time is tight on their build timeline, and we still have a lot of work to do with them, let alone they still have a lot of work to do. So if you're so inclined, we would seek passage tonight.
He's getting ready.
Okay.
I'm going to move to suspend rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 20-07.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Farrell. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 20-07.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Farrell. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you
Good
very
luck.
much.
This time, we're going to do item 11, which is the 7:30 public hearing. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Ordinance number 20-05, an ordinance amending section 901 of the City of Delaware codified ordinances to bring the rules and regulations into conformance with the current right-of-way best management practices.
Thank you. Okay, hang on just a second until we do our step. You're really excited about, you can sit right there, sweetheart, you're good.
Bill.
Mr. Farino.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Before you tonight are just some proposed changes in our current regulations, really to bring the regulations into conformance with best management practices of how we deal with right-of-way. Some of the minor changes in there are administrative. They take the phrase public way and rename that as right-of-way permits. That's the common language used. The second, and probably the meat of this, is strengthening our language regarding requiring maintenance of traffic operations and public notification by applicants. The current code is fairly lax in that area, and we're just strengthening the language within the code, largely by just using, ODOT has a fairly comprehensive and detailed method to do this, and all we've done is really adopted theirs into internal policy. Anyone who works in public right-of-way, whether you're large utility or small, in ODOT right-of-way should already be familiar with this, and we're just adopting those same rules, which aren't onerous. They just make sure that we have ample time to respond as a community, to make sure that appropriate detours are in place and impacts to property owners and businesses are managed up front, and so we have time to notify those folks, and also that there's more notification requirements on those entities causing that work too, as opposed to just the city having to do all that. The last part really is that the fees for the right-of-way permitting is everything is rolled into the Administrative Code, Section 197, where all fees will be managed and not specifically included in this section. Public Works Committee did review these and approved these 3-0 in favor back on February 4th. And we did provide notification to BIA and to all of our partner agencies, utilities. I see representatives tonight from AP here, and also Consolidated, Frontier, and other major utilities, Columbia Gas. So they would have opportunity to be here tonight and ask questions and speak. I can answer any questions at this point or later on.
Questions for Bill? Okay, sorry, that's okay. If you'll please give us your name and address for the record, please.
Renee Shoemate, 700 Morrison Road, Gahanna, Ohio, 43230. I am External Affairs Manager with AEP Ohio. And we are requesting to broaden the language a little bit for the emergency repairs in section 90105. We would like to add some potential language, such as emergency repairs shall include those activities which require immediate action to address imminent danger to the public and/or surrounding properties, and/or require immediate action to restore electricity or other utility services.
He's looking at it.
Can you read that again for me, please?
Sure. Emergency repairs shall include those activities which require immediate action to address imminent danger to the public and/or surrounding properties, and/or require immediate action to restore electricity or other utility services.
Comments on that, Bill?
Yeah, I guess the nature of the comment really is, we talk about down power lines, not necessarily restoring electricity. We include water, gas, and electric in the comments. The nature of the section is to prevent utilities from coming in and trying to skirt the right-of-way process, saying it's an emergency, only to find out that this was scheduled emergency repair for a period of several months, which does happen. So we're trying to define that an emergency is something that as soon as you find out, you have to get out there and make immediate repairs. That's a true emergency. I don't want to say it's so much with AEP. AEP's been generally fairly good to work with. An emergency is an emergency. I don't think we have issues with adjusting the language if we can just have the recording, or Renee, if you could turn that in, and we can consider that and potentially try to incorporate that. I want to make sure I understand what the purpose of the change is, though, and maybe Ms. Schumach could explain that to us.
The explanation that I've been given from legal is that we have an obligation and responsibility to our customers and to the PUCO to restore power to customers as safely and quickly as possible. Additional hazards can include, but are not limited to, pole fires, equipment fires, and broken poles and cross arms. To restore power to customers, whether it is one or in the thousands, it's very important to our crews to work safely, and even more important is keeping the public safe while our crews are working. And this work may require closing a sidewalk, a lane, and/or shoulder of traffic to keep the public safe.
So it's restoration of power, seems
Yes.
to be that. So I don't think there's an issue with trying to reword some of that and include restoration of that utility.
And then we have one other request, section 90107, maintenance of traffic. We'd like to see a sentence added here which says, this section is subject to section 90105.
I think what we can do is review these. Renee can provide these.
I can
and
send them to
as,
you
Bill
in writing.
indicated, we can then review them and work with AEP to see if we can make those changes.
Any questions? Thank you for coming. Thank you. Being so excited about being here. Sorry, I didn't. It's okay. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward on this subject? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Yeah, I just know that there were comments submitted on the record, and I just want to make sure council has those.
I provided them to you,
Okay.
yes,
These were from some of the other utilities, Bill, you had indicated.
I don't have those.
Mentioned from Consolidated, you said you had some Consolidated and Columbia Gas.
I don't.
I contacted them, I think.
Okay.
That doesn't mean they're not turned in. I just don't have those.
Yeah, okay. We can, well,
What is it?
yeah.
time to be off the street.
Yeah, we're recommending this go to another reading.
Yep, we can review all those comments and incorporate accordingly as appropriate. And bring it back to the next meeting.
The other thing to mention is that there will be legislation that will be submitted probably at one of the March meetings to make the changes to the fees. You'll recall when we adopted the budget, we adopted a recommendation from the Public Works Director that we're going to be hiring a third party to assist us with the right-of-way inspection. That's going to cost us approximately $94,000 a year, and we are recommending that we increase some of our right-of-way fees to offset not all of that cost, but some of that cost. So that's going to be submitted separately at an upcoming meeting. That it's part of our administrative code. When we adopt the fees, it's detailed out there. That has to be changed. So we're currently working through that now. But that is something that will be, as I say, brought back to City Council. We're trying to offset as much of these costs as we can by passing those costs along to those folks who are applying for the permits.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, let's move on to item 12, which is a 7:35 public hearing and second reading.
Ordinance number 20-06, an ordinance revising section 909 of the City of Delaware Code of Ordinances establishing general rules and regulations for the maintenance and repair of sidewalks within public right-of-ways.
This is also me?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
similar to 901, the changes in 909 are the sidewalk, curb, and gutter chapter. And again, we're trying to bring it into conformance with best management practices. One important thing that we realized, the language talks about maintenance of sidewalk and references a lot about single-family property owners. It doesn't reference multifamily and commercial properties that happen to have public sidewalk in front of their properties. So we're simply adding those in the definition also, that they're also responsible for maintaining sidewalks for things such as leaf collection, snow and ice removal, and as well as maintenance of the sidewalk when required. We're adjusting the repair criteria to be in conformance with the ADAG and PROAG requirements. There's minor changes in there, but one of them is, there's actually two I'd like to talk about. One is just what we call the tripping hazard. And the tripping hazard really is a 1/4 inch vertical surface or a 1/2 inch beveled surface. So we want to make sure we're adopting their language in terms of how we analyze these things. We use a lot of subjective reasoning when we're looking at these things in the field. In other words, if there's one small section of that walk that has a 1/4 inch lip on it, but the majority of that is not, it's smooth or less than a 1/4 inch, we're not going to make someone repair that or necessarily tear that sidewalk out. So there's obviously some subjectiveness when you evaluate these things. But it's important to make sure that we at least do meet the ADAG and PROAG requirements in our own code.
Those are acronyms, right?
Yes, they are, for American Disabilities Act, Access Guidelines, and the Public Right-of-Way Access Guidelines, which are the federal overlying requirements for how public sidewalks and public ways are maintained in a safe way. The last section is, if for those of you who've been on council for some time, our sidewalk and curb section last time it was updated was basically to roll out the Safe Walks program. And as part of the requirements, we had a fairly stringent time frame associated with that basically spread each phase over almost a 2-year cycle. We're finished with that program 2 years ago. It was very successful. We want to continue the ability to monitor and require sidewalk repairs, but we can't be locked into that 2-year cycle. In other words, if someone reports a tripping hazard in a certain property, we go look at it. We need to be able to just notify that person. If necessary, then we can use the resolutions of necessity to require it, the repair be made, and then go ahead and make the repairs ourselves and invoice those costs, all following Ohio Revised Code. What we're doing in this section is simply allowing those actions to happen anytime throughout the year as necessary. So as damaged sidewalk is uncovered or reported, we can take immediate action and first of all send a letter to that property owner saying, you're out of conformance, would you please make the repair? If not, then we can require the repair through resolutions. but it allows us to do that at any point during the year. We still intend to, and we have some resolutions later on in this meeting, to try to do an annual program so we can offer good pricing to our residents if the city wishes to manage the program. But it does also allow us to act immediately in the case where there are some substantial repairs that need to be made. Public Works Committee again did look at these proposed changes on February 4th and again recommended 3-0 in favor of advancing those onto council for additional consideration. These also were sent to our BIA representatives as well as our major utilities. And so this is second reading and public hearing on this as well.
Quarter Ridge just seems like an awfully small.
It is.
I mean, we tear up a piece of sidewalk for a quarter of an inch.
And that's why we say we want to be very subjective about, is it truly the entire length of that crack or is it one small part? So we also have some new methods to that involve surface planing or grinding to try to get that into conformance instead of ripping out whole sections of sidewalk. So we've personally repaired some ourselves that way through Public Works, just because it was expedient and we had the equipment to do it. So it's a tool in the toolbox now to help, because that is small, and but it is a requirement. So we've been doing a fairly good job with our evaluations over 12 years of program. I think we'll continue to do a good job. And of course, there's always the appeal process that's attached to this that hasn't changed. And any folks that are required can come in and appeal to Public Works Committee, and that committee's determination is the final word on the requirement.
So we were at a half inch, so we're going to a quarter because that's what the federal says?
The code is, we had a half inch of
Yeah.
vertical. The code is that ADAG and PROAG say 1/4 inch straight vertical or a half inch if it's beveled, like a slight bevel to it or an angle to it. So both of those are acceptable conditions in the code, and our codes just had a 1/2 inch vertical, which was out of compliance with the current code. So we're in compliance by putting, by requiring the 1/4 inch and the 1/2 inch beveled. So again, there's some subjective work from our inspectors in the field to be, our goal isn't to go out and find every 1/4 inch discontinuity and replace sidewalk, because in one winter time with frost heave, you could get that. We're out there trying to get the big tripping hazards. But you have to have a baseline. The baseline, in my opinion, needs to match what the federal guidelines that have been adopted, at least on the ADAG side, are law.
So this was originally passed in 2010. I can't believe it was that long ago.
Yes.
So we're done with all of the residential, now we're going to look at downtown?
Well, downtown is a special focus area because of the amount of pedestrian traffic, but on the resolution for necessity for our 2020 program is also in residential areas as well.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that a bit when we bring up that resolution.
Okay. Any questions for Bill?
I have some comments. So I thought it was fine to bring this to the full council. But one thing I talked about a little bit with Tom today was that in section 909.08, it seems to me that the 7% interest rate seems a little high. Suppose you have a citizen who opts to have the city pay for it and get the invoice, and maybe they don't pay, and ultimately this sort of lien would really attach to the land. It seems it might be more appropriate to have this rate, more akin to modern mortgage rates. Seems like, since it's going to might secure to the land, and so I don't know. What was the source of the 7% interest rate? Seems like, I was looking at that list, and maybe you have somebody's not that well off, and all of a sudden they've got to do $2,000 worth of sidewalk repairs they didn't budget for, and city comes and does it and sends them a bill, and 5 years, 7% interest rate, all of a sudden they're paying $60 a month for the sidewalk repair, and I don't know, seems like a high rate of interest to me, so.
Yeah, and I had indicated to Councilman Hoffman that I wanted to get with our new finance director to review that. This is actually something we had in place prior to, and I think it was, some of this was past costs that the auditor would pass through to the city when we set up assessments, but I want to go back over and review that with Mr. Navi and just figure out what, if this is, obviously, it seems high.
But I think the county keeps a portion of it, and
Well,
I think
that's-
that's why we arrived at a 7.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to
I
review.
recall.
Yeah, yeah, there was some, we've done this in the past, I
Right.
just wanted, as I say, just get with,
And I think, I kind of keep thinking they got 3% and we got
Yeah.
4%.
It was
Okay.
an administrative fee that they pass along whenever you do an assessment that actually somebody ends up having to pay. Then there was just the actual holding cost, the interest rate. So I want to, that's what I'm going to
Okay.
follow up with. So we're recommending going to another reading anyway, not the least of which is because of that question that came up.
Well, and wouldn't it make, I don't know, Darren? Would it make sense that, because that could be a dynamic rate, that might be something that could be put into our, I don't know what we call it, you know, where our fee schedule, rate schedule, is that something that would be viable to put in there? Because, you know, if you go back to the days of hyperinflation, you may want to change that. That way then you wouldn't have to go back and actually change the ordinance. You could just refer to that rate schedule.
We could put it in the fee schedule perhaps, although that's usually for a fee you pay at the time, although we do have by analog late fees for when we send you a bill for mowing the lawn and things, so we could put it there. The other thing I was thinking about, and I'll defer to Justin when he digs into it, is you could, instead of putting a percentage, tie it to something. I mean, you could say the cost to the city based on this plus this, so we know what it is, or tied to the borrowing, or I don't know what it is we're doing, but we could tie it to that as well. We have other fees in our fee schedule that are tied to the cost of what we actually provide. So there are creative ways we can do it. I probably want to get with Justin to understand a little bit where that number comes from, but fee schedule or tying it to something standard, both could work, I think. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So we can follow up on
Yeah.
that, definitely.
Any other questions?
But as Bill pointed out, we are looking at two projects this year. One being the downtown, which won't, I mean, whenever we execute a project in the downtown, there's just lots of discussion about that and lots of feedback. So hopefully we can work with the property owners and the business owners both to make sure that gets done efficiently. But it is a fairly large area. And all of those properties are attached and included in that resolution of necessity legislation that's before you later on.
Okay, if no further questions, we'll open this to the public. Is there anyone here that would like to come forward at this time on this subject? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. All right, let's go back up to item 9, which is the 6th reading of ordinance number 19-63. Elena, will please read this into the record?
Ordinance number 19-63, an ordinance accepting the annexation of 43.847 plus or minus acres of land more or less, description and map are attached hereto as exhibits A and B for the annexation known as the Evans Farm Delaware LLC annexation by Andrew Wecker, agent for the petitioners.
Mr. Eflin.
We have Mr. Schulman, Mr. Eflin, Mr. Homan. We'll start with Mr. Schulman.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, in your packet, you may notice that there is a bolded and in brackets section that replaced earlier language to the annexation ordinance requiring joining the NCA. As we've discussed through these many readings, that is not possible because this property is already in an NCA. So Mr. Homan and Mr. Eflin and I, to a lesser extent, have been working with the developer to come up with an alternative solution. Based on the feedback we got from council last time, that solution that we're, I think, pretty close, I'll let Mr. Ironman confirm, pretty close to agreeing with, is in that bolded thing. The reason I put it in bold is I wanted to put it public in the draft so everyone could see it in the packets. However, I didn't want to be so presumptuous as to assume that was okay with council. So basically, we don't have to do any amendments, but if council can give me sense as to whether you'd like us to include that, or if it's not amenable to you, we can change that for the next meeting. But I didn't want to spring that on council or the public at our next meeting, so that's why it's there. Essentially, what it does is it sets three things. One, the amount of the one-time payment. Two, when that payment will be due. And three, the surety method of protecting the city because it's going to be in the future and houses will be hopefully built before that payment is made, so we want to protect ourselves. So those are the three things that we included in that language. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm sure Dave can as well, and City Manager Homan.
I just have one request that somewhere in the language, it be added that this, if it is approved, would only be for this particular development this time and wouldn't carry forward if there were changes of hands or if the development happened to be sold.
Oh, I see. So when you say this development, you don't mean this property, you mean like this thing we're dealing with? Like
Right,
this
so
particular.
it's specific to Evans Farm and these particular developers, and so that if in 2022 they decided to sell it to MI Homes, who may not have the same community authorities and things, that this wouldn't necessarily be in effect. We're not attaching it to the land, but to the development by this developer. Does that make sense?
Well, I have two thoughts on that, and I'll defer to Dave a little bit. I'm not sure we necessarily can because it's part of the annexation, but Dave might have some insight. But with that said, I think, sorry to put on you too, Dave, I think once it's in the NCA, even if they sell the property to another developer, I think it's still in a new community authority because it's a quasi-governmental entity as opposed to, a contrivance just by the private entity. So I think even if they sold it, they would still have the same issue with the new community authority already being sucked up by that other one. So I don't know if that would necessarily solve it, but I would say they would still be bound by the same requirement to pay us. But I don't know if we could condition that because that was part of the annexation requirements. But Dave, do you have any thoughts on that, whether?
I think it's a good point with respect to not so much the developer, but to the NCA, the Evans NCA. So I think we could perhaps add some language to say if it were to ever come out within the time period of that's shown in here, if it were to come out of the Evans NCA for some unforeseen reason, then
I think that'd be the trigger, I think.
then it would go in the Delaware NCA.
Right.
But I don't think any of us, to Darren's point, would anticipate that.
But that we could do. I think we could, that part, I think Dave's right, we could re-put that in there.
That makes sense. I mean, the spirit of this is that it's because it's encumbered by the NCA with the Evans property and the expected NCA with the cities, we're doing this. It's not, I mean, so if for some reason it did change hands and they were encumbered by the Evans NCA, you want the existing one to apply.
Sure.
Okay.
I think that protects the city given any eventuality. Unlikely, but possible.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
The only thing I will throw out there is Tony, you're on the spot, but maybe we can communicate afterwards if that's going to create a problem, or we can run it by your folks. I doubt it would because it, did you know already?
He can come up.
Yeah, that'd
He's
be great.
saying, can he come to the microphone? Come on
Yeah,
up,
I didn't know
Tony.
if you knew now or if you need to go back and talk to people. I apologize.
Good evening, I'm Tony Ironman with Evans Farm. What Darren, Tom, and David have all said is exactly the case, is that the land is encumbered. If the solution that you offered, if the land's ever taken out of the Evans Farm NCA, we'd be pleased to agree with what you had proposed. So I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for from me.
That helps me to write it out.
Okay.
Mhm. Any other questions for Tony since he's here? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions from council? All right.
The only question is, do you want to try to act, do you want to go to another reading on this? We have the 9th is the last meeting that you can act on this.
I'd like to see it just get wrapped up tonight.
Okay, well, maybe what we could do is, we could give Darren the opportunity to make the changes, and we can come back. Is that all right? We can come back to it? Let him, tonight? Okay. let him-
I do have a prepared statement I want to read on this,
Okay.
please. So as we've gone down through this, and there's been a lot of information about this annexation. And it should be no surprise to anyone that I'm obviously opposed to this. I wanted to give you this statement to explain that position. So a utility planning boundary is basically an agreement giving a municipality first right of refusal to serve a property. The Southeast Highland Sewer does not require this land, the land being proposed to be annexed, to be financially viable. We were told in previous meetings, whether it was, I think it was finance, could have been public works, that the Southeast Highland Sewer is now self-funding due to ongoing development, which will continue to occur and accelerate with or without the property in question. Why would we wish to utilize existing finite capacity to serve land that is not in the city currently, while the city continues with explosive organic growth? Soon enough, we will be looking at sewage plant upgrades and expansion. For the sake of our existing property owners and residents, we should not hasten this capital-intensive project that will financially impact all city residents. Roads will connect regardless. Stormwater and sanitary sewer will occur without annexation. It will not be on the city to provide these services. The township and county is responsible for providing these services. This is also a non-issue. Going on, the quality of the development in question is also a non-issue when it comes to residential annexation, unless the city chooses to discriminate based on the housing being proposed, which I know is not the case. The property in question is not an island interior to city boundaries. It extends city boundaries. Development is not going to suffer if this property is not within the city, nor will any existing residents of the city be positively impacted by the proposed annexation. I suggest connectivity between the proposed development, existing, and future developments will be similar regardless of annexation. This is not an issue. The developer, of their own choosing, created an NCA for their development. At no time did the city encourage or require the developer to take the actions associated with their NCA. Now the developer wants the city to provide financial assistance to bail them out of the consequences of their decisions. The city manager's letter to council on this matter, dated January 23rd, states, quote, rather than pass a full 17.5 mils burden onto the future homeowner, the city and the applicant are working to find a solution beneficial to all parties and equitable to those already in the South NCA. From the same letter comes this information. City staff projects NCA revenue for this property at $403,389. The applicant countered with a payment of $250,000 3 years in the future. This is a 38% discount in the payment amount for 35 lots and forgoes NCA charges on 24 lots within this development. Where's the equity to those already in the South NCA? The various reports, fact sheets, and letters try to paint this annexation at the lower NCA charge amount as being good for the city and remove some of the costs from the homeowner choosing to purchase a property with full disclosure of all NCA charges. Is the city willing to reduce the NCA amount for all other property owners in the South NCA by 38%? This is corporate welfare at its core. The developer needs to pay the full share of the NCA. If the developer determines it is not financially viable to develop the land by paying the same amount as every other property owner in the South NCA area, they have two options. They can forego annexation and stay in the township, or they can attempt to sell their houses with 17.5 mils of NCA charges. Our residents deserve to be treated equitably. Everyone in the South NCA gets the same discount, or no one does. That's it.
I also, just to kind of add on to what George said a little bit, I went back in our council record And we actually were the proximate city when the Evans Farm NCA was approved. And at that time, we were told that it would have little or no impact on us, and that the city didn't anticipate that this would ever impact us at all. But I'm surprised by that, because now we're being told that this area was sort of always anticipated to be part of our boundaries. And so if that was the case, and we knew that it was in the NCA, then why would we be told that it wouldn't impact us at all at that time? Because we approved Evans Farms NCA.
I can't speak to the, most of what you said. I can tell you in terms of the impact that we generally look at with NCAs and proximate cities, we're talking about things like, will the building of the stuff there impact the city, like with the point and the traffic, and will it, mess with our signals and things like that? This is a larger NCA that has that sliver that's in the city, so I'm going to guess it was just an oversight as to that piece. But this is a bigger NCA that, no one's here saying building the other part of the Evans Farm development is going to bleed over and cause us more traffic or concern. So when you were told it didn't have an impact, I think that's what we were talking about, but it probably was a mistake that we missed the
Yeah,
sliver.
I acknowledge that. We didn't catch it. We should have. We didn't. It's on us.
I think it's,
And it's ultimately, as I've indicated to council, I think, we're doing calculations now to determine at what point we will have to probably adjust back that 7.5 mil charge, because at the current rate of collection, it's going to collect more than it needs to. So there will be a point in the future when the NCA board will elect, hopefully, to ratchet that back. That's what we're trying to get a handle on right now. It's not an easy calculation, because it's a function of the number of projected homes to be built, what's being built out there now, what that debt service calculation is. But there will be a point where we will be coming back. The NCA board will be able to do that. So, that's another factor. But I think that
we discussed this earlier, but so then what would happen potentially if homes are built prior to 2023? And I know that you said that the NCA, we don't anticipate being paid off until 2029?
but 28. Yeah.
But we are paying it faster than we anticipated that we would be. So what would happen if it ends up getting paid faster than we anticipate, but then the Evans Farm payment isn't going to be made until 2023? And what if that's paid already?
If the Evans Farm payment is made already?
You're asking if everyone else is paid off before the Evans Farm
What
payment?
if we change it, or what if we make these adjustments that we're talking about, or what if there's lots and lots of development that we didn't anticipate? And what if we're saying, wow, we retired this way early, then what do we do with that $250,000 in 2023? Let's say it's paid off in 2022. I know it's
And that would
unlikely,
be-
but
It's,
just wouldn't, not even possible?
no.
Okay.
I don't
And
think
the
so.
thing about the reduction, I think, is they're trying to hit the end, close to the end of the year, so they don't collect more money than is owed. So the reduction would be nice for the owners, but it doesn't pay it off faster. It actually just tries to stretch out that payment to hit the end so we don't collect too much. So if we did notch it back, it would be actually slower to pay it off. But the homeowners would pay less.
Tom, I don't necessarily think that it's the city's responsibility to say, oh, we messed up, I don't know that you could have necessarily
Well-
anticipated that. I feel like that's taking a little bit too much blame.
Well, I think it was, I think had we put more, I think to Darren's point, the impact is always more about the impact of the development on the actual, on the city itself. I think we weren't thinking that there's an existing millage that was going to bump up against our expected millage, and there was going to be a conflict. That's what I think we didn't think.
When was that planned for, and I guess in terms of what the Evans Farm developers were thinking?
I can't recall what year that was.
Yeah, Evans Farm, since I've been here, it's not that old, but It's literally not one of the things we usually look at with those, so I can see where it would fall through, because we always send it to, engineering, and is this gonna mess with our roads or anything, and is this gonna
Right.
change
I
a
mean,
bit, so it's just a weird circumstance.
I just don't think anyone anticipated, did we think they'd ever annex? I mean, back then, I don't think we hadn't annexed any of those pieces there. So I think that kind of would have been expecting you to look into a crystal ball. Unless you knew you wanted to, and then that doesn't make sense.
I also seem to recall, and again, I'm kind of going in my memory, that there was some earlier talk about maybe more of the Evans Farm coming in, and we had a discussion that we didn't want to serve all down there, so we did discuss whether we wanted in. I think we just assumed that it wasn't coming in because we said we can't do the whole thing. So again, Tom doesn't need to fall on the sword, I just don't think it occurred to us that that was there. Do you remember that too, Madam Mayor? Or did you had that conversation? It's probably a bad time to mention it, but I did briefly walk over to Dave. I do have the language that I think would do the trick. If you were inclined to amend it, I can read it, or I can wait until the discussion is done to tell you what it is, but I can have that ready, depending how you want to go today.
I mean, I hate to reverse what I just said 20 minutes ago, but I'd almost like to take it to another reading, and I'd like, if Mr. Hellander would not mind forward that, would you?
Sure.
On, 'cause I'd like to kind of read that again myself, but that's just me speaking, so.
I know one of the concerns I'd had, and this isn't an Evans Farm specific one, is just when we annex land, we're adding significant burden with services to the city. And depending on how much we're building, I had Tom and Ford, an email, I think everybody was on it, a document from 2001 about does it pay for itself, basically? So does our tax income from that pay for road maintenance, trash, water, all those things? I haven't gotten a chance to read the whole thing yet, but, so I wouldn't mind some additional time to kind of think about that. I forgot the other thing I was going to say, so I'll come back.
Welcome to our world. Did you have anything to add? Yes, I think.
I'm abstaining from this discussion.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
One of the things, Madam Mayor, that I keep tossing around, and it's by no means a very, it's a very crude estimate of does growth pay for itself? And when I look at the current state that we are in, if we just took the last 10 years of policy decisions in terms of annexations or expanding the city, and does it pay for itself? And I feel like we have the answer to that question when we look at what our deficit is in terms of our roads, that if all of this growth was paying for itself, we wouldn't be so far behind. So I almost feel like we're all in this bucket and we have this hole over here. And we're talking about how we're going to patch this hole, but we're creating leaks in other places by continuing to do the same policy decisions without any planning on how it's going to make sense in the future. So that if we do something with the funding for the roads by increasing the burden on the citizens, then if we continue annexations, that policy decision will only last for a certain amount of time before we have to go back and do that again and again with fire, with police, and with a whole bunch of other things too. And we've had a police levy in the past, or I'm sorry, a fire levy in the past 10 years. And we've needed to raise rates on a whole bunch of things to increase capacity. Is growth paying for itself? I'd love to see that financial analysis, but I would have to say from an anecdotal analysis, I'm questioning if it is.
Because that doesn't pertain particularly to Evans Farm matter, but it's more of a philosophical discussion, I'm going to chime in.
Okay.
You think about maybe a couple cracks in a road, a couple cracks in a sidewalk that come with more people. And then you go down to First Friday, a nice summer day, and think about what it's like now versus 10 years ago, 15 years ago. People like my family moved here, and I'd like to think that the vibrancy, the culture, the fun, all of that is what makes a good city more than, it's more about, there's more to it than just the cost of nuts and bolts. There's the zest for life that makes a good city. If you think growth is expensive, go to a town like Lorain, Ohio, where people leaving is even more expensive, where they can't even pay the bill to keep stoplights on.
Although I'd argue that that wouldn't stop people from coming to town. I mean, if a house is going to be built, it's going to be built whether it's part of our city or not. That's just, I mean, it could be part of the township. We're still the closest city, the closest entertainment center, so I don't know if that would hold up.
I think that's a fair point, Drew. I'm just talking about the concept of growth in general, people moving into an area, whether they're across this border, this tax boundary, or what have you. You know, that's a more nuanced discussion, but growth, people coming together, building new things, I think is what I was trying to get at.
I think that's an excellent counterpoint. So what I would love to see us do as a council is to create future policy for the city that marries those two things together so that we can have the vibrancy, but that doesn't put us in a position where we have to burden our citizens to the point where they're considering leaving because they can't keep up with the tax increases of the schools, the fire, the police levy that we'll eventually need, the road levies and things like that. You know, how do we make sure that we're not doing that?
I'd like to weigh in a little bit on this too, so to kind of follow up on what Corey said. You know, when you think of growth, I think we can't just look at the infrastructure needs that we have on streets that are 20 and 25 years old. You know, when we bring new houses in, we have impact fees for police, for fire, for all those kinds of things. And we're bringing in taxpayers that are paying taxes to the city. The real problem that we have is that we've got older roads. It's not the new development that's costing us money. It's the fact that we don't have a mechanism in place for older roads, the ones that are 20 and 25 years old, to keep those up. And so I don't think it's so much that the new growth is costing us money. I don't know whether it's cost neutral or positive or negative. I think there's overall, to Corey's point, we don't want to stop growing and start going the other way. You know, then we won't have enough tax dollars to pay the bills. I think the problem is that one issue, that road issue, is the one we can't get our hands on. You know, the rest of it, I think we're doing a pretty good job. You know, I think we're keeping up with police and fire and those kinds of things. We just don't have a system in place. The one weakness we have is that we've got these roads that are getting older, you know, and we just can't figure out how to keep them up. But I don't think we should just say that that one issue is how we decide whether growth is cost neutral or cost negative or whatever. Because I think there's other pieces to the growth picture that we need to keep in mind.
Well, I personally have enjoyed this discussion.
Me too.
And one of the comprehensive plan has, that we're updating right now, has part of the scope is to actually do this analysis. Will help to get to this elusive question. I mean, it's not an elusive question. The answer is somewhat elusive in terms of how it pays for itself. I don't know if the law that says it has to pay for itself. You'd like to have that scenario, obviously, and that's why we're trying to grow the economic base of the community. But having a vibrant community, having available housing, having all of those things in place makes it easier when we're not trying to get employers to locate here or to get existing employers to expand. They want to know the vibrancy of the community. And I would argue that the state that we're in today is in large part because we have been able to grow, I think, more responsibly in terms of impact fees, in terms of tax increment financing, in terms of all the different things we've put in place. There are definitely challenges. The biggest is in the road area, and obviously in operating, I think the police chief would probably say he's got some challenges, and some of those are dollar driven and would be helped with additional revenue. But anyway, we have tasked the consultant to help us look at this and have a kind of a fact-based discussion about it.
You know, Corey, you brought up First Fridays, and I've had two restaurants last week both tell me that First Fridays are their worst night of the month. And I went, what? And they said their regulars won't come downtown. And he said, and there's so much activity on the street, but that's not to say that those new people out there aren't coming back later, so they may be gaining ones. But it's not, First Friday is not beneficial to all of our restaurants, which really surprised me. So I think First Fridays are great, don't get me wrong, I don't want them to go away, but it's a different way to look at things.
Right.
And when somebody tells me that we have too many people downtown, you have a parking problem, I say, great, I want to have a parking problem. Go to Marion, you can park anywhere you want. So there's some problems that I
Yeah.
welcome. So it's just different ways to look at things.
I mean, I think it's just ultimately, you know, life is not black and white, it's shades of gray, and thankfully, we have developed things like city council with a lot of smart people, with a lot of different ideas, and we get to discuss it and figure it all out.
You know, and it may be that we decide that the vibrancy is worth what we know it will cost. I'm just getting at, we should at least know what it's going to cost so that we can make decisions. I feel like now we're sort of trying to guess based on numbers from 2002, and so that's what makes these decisions challenging, I think.
I can remember school board saying for every new house you bring in, it costs us money because of the amount of kids that are coming in. That doesn't mean we shouldn't bring houses in, it's just a different way to look at things.
Right.
How they're gonna do things.
And our school funding system is broken as broken could
Right.
be, and, you know, people living in Olentangy right now are looking at huge increase in their taxes to pay for some of the growth that's happened there too. So there is a cost to it.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna go to
You want us then, we will come up with
reading
that,
7.
yeah,
Amend that language.
amend the language, bring it
He's got
back.
that
Yeah.
done.
I got that, you'll put it
But
in.
we're gonna review
Right.
what,
I think,
the letter you sent out and what George has written.
Yeah.
I think if he'll send out to everybody.
Okay.
So, sorry, number 7's coming up. But it'll have to be decided that night.
Yeah, you-
Everybody
yeah.
planning on being here that night? Okay,
What night is it?
don't give me that.
I think it's the
Ninth.
ninth.
Just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to item 14, which is the second reading of ordinance number 20-08.
Ordinance number 20-08, an ordinance approving a combined preliminary and final development plan for K2 development for Glenwood Commons Shopping Center for an approximate 96,100 square foot retail building located at 1180 Sunbury Road in Zone B3 PMU, Community Business District with a planned mixed-use overlay district on approximately 14.198 acres.
Ms. Drefflin?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is for a combined preliminary and final development plan for missing development piece within the city's largest shopping center, which was developed right before the Great Recession, actually. Unfortunately for the shopping center owners in our community, but fortunately for us, our community was resilient enough, as were the center owners, to put in a couple of anchor tenants and get the center started, and it continued and survived the Great Recession. I think it's doing well, and this developer, now K2, Chris, is looking at filling in what was to be the Home Depot piece at the time between Myers and Kohl's, essentially, in the Glenwood Commons Shopping Center. Council will recall that the shopping center, our wetland park, make sure TV's working, and the apartments behind that at the time all came in as a planned mixed-use overlay. There were to be a mixture of different kinds of residents where Quail Pass apartments are today. Fast forward, and Zaremba got out of the residential development business, but we have a mixed-use overlay in this area that includes the shopping center, and it has a specific design text, as one can easily see by the development that's out there already today. This is the site we're talking about. It's literally a pad-ready site. The parking lot's in. Heck, the landscaping is in for the parking lot without the business being there. There's a large mound back to Mill Run Crossing with landscaping in as well. So this is really the building pad that we're talking about. This is the relocated Mill Run stream. And the site plan accounts for approximately 91,000 square feet to fill in the Home Depot site. would include, tenants would include, as of now, Hobby Lobby, TJ Maxx, Ulta Beauty, and Five Below, which I know, according to social media in Delaware, are very exciting names for the community. But they are, for me, they're just names until they're built and the name goes over the door opens up, because things can change. Hopefully they don't, but part of that is time and money and execution. So we're appreciative to K2 and Chris to come along and sort of fill in this missing tooth in our development. That certainly doesn't necessarily help the center or the community overall to have a missing tooth. The one thing I would point out is that on the site plan, you'll notice a potential addition or a fifth tenant space that would be close to, I think, 9,000 or 12,000 square feet or so to be determined. Really just showing that it could be placed on this site plan. But if and when Chris gets a tenant and they look to expand, which Murphy's Law would probably indicate as soon as he gets this approval, he'll get a new tenant, but he'd have to come back through preliminary and final development plan review for that portion of the building as well. I know these don't show up very well on here. It's just because the line work is so intense in the original PDF. Hopefully your packets, if you zoom in, it shows up better. But this was the original submission that went to Planning Commission. Just to point out here very quickly, you can see a couple of blank walls without some of the wrapping along the walls and without the breakup of the walls. You can see a large expanse of white EFS space on a couple of these tenant centers. And so what's in your packet now and what's before you for consideration for approval are these revised after going to Planning Commission and working with the applicant a little bit more before they came here tonight. This is that blank wall that we were just looking at, broken up with stone pillars at appropriate places in the wall, in addition to wrapping some of the design from the front, and then along the back. This is along the access road, and there's actually a pretty robust row of trees at this point. They're actually a little bit bigger than what they're showing here. This is the other side of the building where it would wrap along, and you have Mill Run Stream right here, and then you have the side of Myers that goes into their truck docks and things. It's not really a public area. The front changes to include a cornice line that is upgraded all the way across and more consistent with the center. It's also consistent in color, that is not being white. Across the top here, the large expanses of the white EFS accent material have been minimized to literally just behind the signs of those two businesses. We would find that to be consistent with the center design guidelines in our conversation at City Council as well. Your Planning Commission does recommend approval unanimously at their last meeting with the conditions noted, as do we as staff, and it would be nice to complete at least the back portion of this center. We still have some outlots to go, obviously, but this development should help those outlots as well. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
I already know the answer to this, Dave, but I'm asking for the benefit of the public because I've read some of the comments.
Okay.
And they are saying.
Why don't you just set me up with a question, Councilwoman?
Basically, we are not examining each business based on what we think about the business or the merits of the business. We're examining whether this plan conforms with the zoning, setbacks, landscaping, et cetera. But we're not saying we like or dislike Hobby Lobby or Ulta or any of the retailers.
Yeah, and I very much appreciate that question. And I've remarked before that we do not review these with the name above the door in mind. Whether they're names that the community might like in this case, whether they're names that the community has expressed in the past that it maybe doesn't like on other sites, and packs this room full of contentious hearings. We review it with respect to the design requirements that are in place for this particular center on this particular site. And our comments as staff are related to ensuring that this developer is held to the same standard that the original developer, and even Canes and some of the outlots that we've seen, Canes being the most recent, have been held to as they've come in. We've had a little bit of discussion on the design with respect to this. Planning Commission is recommending to use some form liner walls along the sides of the building. These are the less public sides. That's basically poured in place and stained to kind of look like brick. But we think with the landscaping and breaking up those walls that they've achieved compliance with the design requirements, and it will fit in with the rest of the center. So, yes, I appreciate the question, Councilwoman McKellar, and that's how we view these things. If we simply view things as what we like and we don't like, one can imagine the kind of community, not just in commercial, but maybe residential, that we might have. And certainly that would violate all sorts of laws and just decency. So we just view it in terms of what the requirements are for the center.
Thank you for that.
Appreciate the question.
You know, one of those discussion
go back
points
to that.
was when it looked like, you know, that might actually happen. You know, it's like, well, we're saddled with this big box store now. You know, what would we do with that, and how do we ensure something positive happens with those big box structures in the future? Now, I know this is multi-tenant, it's already set up, so it probably has a much less concern, but have we addressed that at all over those intervening years as to, I mean, big box really don't really exist now?
They
More
don't,
like
they
this,
do
but-
exist, but not certainly like they did during that
Yes.
discussion throughout the country. But no, we haven't taken, I think you're referring to what's commonly referred to as sort of the ghost box phenomenon, when a big box moves out and then what backfills a gigantic previous retail space. Well, what we've kind of determined and seen throughout the country, and even to an extent we've had it happen here with the Bueller space, is that people can come in and demise those spaces in a healthy market. You just had a discussion about markets that maybe aren't so healthy throughout Ohio, and those probably remain ghost boxes because they're just not healthy growing places. But in a healthy growing place like us, we see the Buellers is a great example for us. That was a ghost box for a little while, albeit on its scale for its time. And I think it's been pretty successfully refilled between the market, between our design standards. Recall we had Panera and some other things. You made some adjustments as council to that center, and so it's a little more visible to the back. And I think that those helped. And a growing community helped, and someone who wanted to make an investment. And they're in our economic development team and the whole city staff team that always sits back there before you help to create that opportunity that we see now. So I think in here, if you add in the addition, you're over 100,000 square feet. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether you're a little under or a little over 100,000. I think what we've done is we've broken up the front of this large building. The building essentially is a large building that's demised. And so if TJ Maxx goes out in the future, you know, Chris or somebody else, I'm confident in, assuming we have the same healthy market here in the city of Delaware, would come in and backfill that space, and we would do the same kind of thing we did with the Bueller space and work to try to help the private market do that to the extent that it's our role to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Also, when Kroger's went out, then Pat Catans went in and fixed that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Their home office decided, but I think we'll get something else in there. I know I'm frustrated in this shopping center that we've got Hibbett that went out, Maurice's that went out, and they're all right that stretch. But I'm hoping when this comes in, that'll
Revitalize.
absolutely.
Well, part of that's the changing nature of the retail world, which is undergoing some significant changes.
Well, two of those went out when Tanger went in. That's where they went, unfortunately.
Given the reaction of the community, I would say that they're ready to mob this. Absolutely. I mean, I think on that one Facebook post that I got where I posted about it, I had something like 25,000 different interactions. I mean, on a normal post, it's about 500. So it was like created a frenzy.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, would the applicant like to add anything? You have to come to the table, name and address, you know the rules.
Good evening, Chris Krastofsky, K2 Retail. In development, we're based out of Bingham Farms, but obviously I live in Ohio now. I moved my whole family here. We live in Plain City. Look, I just want to add to the, I was listening to number 9 here about, the growth, and I come from a city in Michigan that is considered one of the top cities to live.
Which one? We're all in
Novi.
Michigan. Okay.
Novi. And I'll tell you right now, one of the reasons why I moved to Ohio is because your infrastructure, your quality of life, and I'm having a brain, it is much better than where I came from. People are better. It's a lot more just kind of like a family environment type of atmosphere here. Your growth is just fine. And I encourage you guys to continue to grow. And the way I see, and from what I see, I think you guys are in the right direction. And I want to partner. Look, I'm here to take part of it. So I'm here for the long haul, even beyond this. So we're going to look at more opportunities here within the city of Delaware to kind of expand our presence here beyond this. So we look forward to working with you guys. On another note, to answer Mr. Hellinger's concern, these are the 4 top retailers in the nation right now that e-commerce just cannot compete with. There's good articles you can look up on. CNN Money did an article about how Amazon just cannot compete with the TJ Maxx's, the Ultas, the Rosses, and all those guys. So they're in here guaranteed for 10 years. They're not going here for 10 years. And if the success is the way, I think everybody envisions it, I think they're going to be here for quite a long time. So they're all great tenants and, financially sound. So I'll add to that. So other than that, we look forward to doing it. We have a planned start of sometime in April, depending on how quickly we can get these drawings done. And we're ready to roll. So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any questions for the applicant?
I have one.
Okay.
I think over there by Mr. F1 is like the submittal board on the side. That was for this project I saw, Dave, right?
Yep.
So, is the Endicott product been, is that the product that's been chosen, that Endicott iron spot right there?
I believe so, yes.
All right, I'm gonna have to abstain from this vote.
That's what
I represent Endicott, so I.
Oh, do you really?
Apparently you had nothing to do with that selection. 'Cause you
No,
didn't
I
let it
didn't.
till today.
That's
That's good.
I think it was the planning commission's final on this one, wasn't it?
Yeah. Hazards of selling brick and
I
stuff.
guess.
Well, that's a bummer. I was looking for a unanimous vote.
Abstention is not break the unanimous. You can still get the unanimous.
Oh,
vote.
good deal.
No one has an objection. I'm ready to move forward tonight.
Please do.
Okay, I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 20-08.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Keller, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Abstain.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move for approval of ordinance 20-08.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Keller, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Abstain.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Good luck.
Thank you. And I'll probably see you guys here in about another 2 weeks because All right, everybody have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 15 is the second reading of ordinance number 20-09.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Just as an update again, the purpose of this ordinance is to
Wait,
provide.
She has to read it first.
Oh, I'm
Hang on
sorry.
1 second, sweetie. You're cute. You're excited. I can tell.
Ordinance number 20-09, an ordinance supplementing the 2020 appropriations ordinance to provide additional funding for pavement maintenance projects and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to provide for the maintenance of the local street resurfacing program, as well as the 2020 ODOT urban resurfacing program, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you, Mayor, council members again. Just as an update, these appropriations would provide supplementals for the paving program, specifically $81,000 for the street maintenance fund for local paving, as well as an additional $158,000 for the ODOT urban resurfacing program, and those funds would come out of the capital improvement fund.
Questions for Justin?
Yeah,
we
we'd
do
like
this
to have this
tonight?
tonight because we'd like to get the legislation
Right.
back to ODOT.
About that last week.
I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 20-09.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of the emergency clause on ordinance 20-09.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 20-09.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. And item 16 is the second reading of resolution number 20-16.
Resolution number 20-16, a resolution accepting negotiated changes to the Fraternal Order of Police Office and Clerical Employees, FOP Clerical Agreement with the City of Delaware.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I gave you a high-level summary of what this contract entails last time. Tonight, we brought Jessica Feller, who was part of the negotiating team and is the head of our HR department, if you have any questions. Also, I want to announce that I got notice that on Friday, the union met and did vote to approve this contract. So if council is comfortable with it, we would recommend voting on it tonight. However, if you want to take it to 3 readings, that'd be fine as well. Happy to answer any questions you have, and Jessica and Tom can help too.
Questions?
Looks like a good deal.
Anybody need Jessica to explain anything? You can go home, sweetie. Okay.
Oh, all that.
I know, she said only think.
I'm gonna
She
think of
really
a-
want to.
I'll think of a
The
question.
record carries reflects that she was sitting there, but did not say
I
anything.
know. Okay, what is, which council?
Make a motion to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on resolution 2016.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Farrell.
We don't need to.
It's a
suspend the
resolution,
rules.
so
Oh.
you can vote on it without that, but
Oh, yeah, just move for approval of resolution 2016.
I'll second that.
I didn't think about that.
Okay, motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Farrell. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 17 is consideration of resolution 20-18. We'll read this into the record.
Resolution number 20-18, a resolution approving dynamic speed feedback signs for Hall Drive.
I'll take that. Madam Mayor, members of council, I've presented information before on this. Put additional information in the packet. But in summary, we still are having speeds significantly improving the roads. And we're asking the residents to look at their walks too. And again, the city will make repairs to the street tree damaged walks in those areas. This is just a step we need to go through. The resolution allows us to contact the property owners, send a notification, and give them through July to make repairs, encourage them to do so, or to allow us to make those repairs and just invoice them. That's what these 2 resolutions of necessity include. If there's anything specific before next reading, get it through Tom, and we can try to bring additional information. If there's concerns regarding the downtown area or the 2020 sidewalk maintenance program.
Okay, we'll take those to reading and then 9. Finance Director's report.
Thanks, Mayor, council members. Just a few quick items. Total income tax collections in January were about $2.39 million, and that's for all 3 of the tax types. That reflects an increase of about $136,000 or 6% from the same period of last year. Some other miscellaneous projects, the e-filing website for self-prepared tax returns went live over the weekend. If a resident or a taxpayer files and pays with an e-check through the system, there's no fee. However, we do use a product called Official Payments. So if a customer goes onto that platform separately and makes a payment, for e-checks, it's a $3 fee. For credit cards, it's 2.85% or a minimum of $3.95. Second item, we're preparing to have a remote location on tax day at Mingo Park. It's my understanding there were long lines here at City Hall last year. The intent is we'll have a remote location to have residents come in and file their taxes on the 15th. There's plenty of parking. We'll have all the computers set up and payment acceptance.
We'll be indoors,
It'll
not
be
in the
indoors.
park. We'll
Yeah.
be where the offices are there.
We will still be having staff collect filings here at City Hall. Obviously, people are still going to come here, but there'll be another location at Mingo Park. Another item, today we received the award notification for the 2018 CAFR, so I just wanted to congratulate Dean and Rob Alger for receiving that award. We had an audit on our pension contributions for 2019 last week by the state auditor, and we received a clean audit on that as of today. Lastly, at the Finance Committee meeting, we discussed an updated format to the monthly financials, so that'll be presented in the council packet for February, starting next month. And that's my report.
Maybe Lee can make sure it gets on the water bill about your secondary place for April. Thank you.
Just a couple quick items. State of the County is tomorrow, which I'll be attending. Then there's a climate summit this Saturday. Terry Hermson has organized this. I provided this in a previous biweekly, but I'll have Lee send out a reminder. If you have a chance to stop by, it's at Stratford Ecological Center. It's all day long. It's a pretty interesting workshop that they put together on just how a local community and a local region can address climate change and sustainability. And then pool rates. We had, I think, circulated previously some recommendations for changes in pool rates, mostly to the non-resident category, but we're also making recommendations that we'll be handling administratively, notifying daycare, the daycare community, and others of limitations that we're going to put on beginning in 2020 to reduce the loading that we had in that pool. This will free up space for residents who have bought memberships. We're trying to balance, obviously, the needs for day camps and others with the folks who've signed up for memberships. So.
Yeah, the resident rates we're proposing do not change at all. It's all just non-residents, and it's based on comparisons with other community pools around. We found out we haven't updated these rates for many years, and wanted to see what other pools in our area were doing and base those, do a comparison and find out where we should be with the market. And like I said, the resident rates don't change, and again, this will be part of a solution to the capacity issues. It's not the issue to solve all, but it'll be part of it.
Any questions? That was my question, is was it financially motivated or was it? So it's capacity motivated?
Sort of, but it's long overdue.
Okay.
We haven't looked at this for a long time either.
And just for clarification, the Y continues to operate the pool and the recreation programs through 20. We need to have a separate conversation with City Council about 21. Our direction was that you wanted us to take the pool back in 21. Still outstanding was the question about recreation services, and that's tied into the PROS consulting survey that we're doing, which will hopefully provide us more information about whether to, what we're going to do with the YMCA, because they're interested as much as we're interested. So we'll be talking.
When do we expect that?
The PROS report.
Probably the end of May, beginning of June. The survey should be releasing in about the next month.
Yeah. Okay. But we are gearing up. As we said, we put money in the budget this year for a recreation position for next year, assuming that we would be getting back into both the pool and the recreation programming. So we've just obviously got to kind of get that wrapped up here soon. So, but if you're all right, we'll just move ahead then with the pricing as recommended by the Parks Board. So everybody's okay with that.
I'd like to just make one comment. And Tom, I mentioned it to you in our call earlier today. If you look in all that detailed information that Ted sent out, if you look in the Gahanna portion of those papers, you will see a cost recovery model. And
Tiered.
Yeah, tiered. pyramid-type cost recovery model that I think would be very beneficial for us to employ, and it would take a lot of the subjectivity out of what we're doing with the rates on any given thing, and just really make it much more objective overall. So, I mean, I would like to see us at least consider employing something along that same cost recovery model.
That component is part of the needs assessment, and I think PROS did the Gehanna model also.
I looked at it, it is good.
Thanks.
That's all I have.
Any council comments? Mr. Jones?
Yeah, just real briefly, I was approached a month or two ago by some members of the Fair Board, and I think, Mayor, you were as well. They asked me to introduce some sort of legislation where they would like to do an honorary street sign down Pennsylvania Avenue that says Little Brown Jug Way, like how we have Branch Rickey Way, things like that. I think it's a great idea, and I talked to Mr. Farrell about it because that Pennsylvania runs through both of our wards. So I would like to move forward to help them do that because it's their 75-year anniversary, I believe, this year, so the time would be perfect. The reason I bring this up is we have to, I think, revise the legislation we passed recently on that because if I recall it, there's wording there about, basically it was people-oriented. You had to be dead, you had to be, this, that, and the other. We had to change the wording in that ordinance.
This
in
is
order
an
to-
event, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
to do this. So I'm going to work with Drew and with Darren, try to get this moving forward. I just hope you guys will support that. I think it's well overdue. That's it.
Just going back to the Cobblestone Carson Farms thing, I think I'll follow up with the city manager, and maybe we should, I mean, someone tell me if I'm on the wrong track here, but should we wait to see what happens on executive before we move forward with those other two? Because what if we did all three and we raised the speed on all three, and then we're gonna be talking about removing stripes on 4th Street?
I mean, the research we've seen shows that the striping does impact. I've not seen research that shows that speeds go up, but we could. When would we do this, Bill?
We have approval, this body's approved for all these streets now. We're not rushing out there to do it in the wintertime, so we can certainly rethink it a little bit if we want to, and maybe come back with recommendation as to, let's do this street first, or let's not do this street right away, or.
I'm wondering what it would look like if we compared, we did the stripes on executive, and we're making Cobblestone one of these target enforcement areas, and then compare, I don't know. I'm just afraid to make it worse.
Why don't, since, as Bruce alluded to, we've kind of created a group, a safety group with police and public works engineering. Why don't we bring that up in that safety group and
Okay.
talk about that and come back with a recommendation, how to
Perfect.
advance that?
Okay. Thank you.
I'll try to be quick. I think this is my favorite city council meeting so far. I thought everybody had really interesting, good comments and good feedbacks, the staff, the council members, and I thought it was enjoyable. And, just with regard to this last, talking about, $16,000 for uniformed police officers to enforce, speed limit, what's the cost of that? And then I also think about, on Hawthorne, there's a house on the street that the family has a little sign out front, says, drive like your kid lives here, And so if enforcement or speed mitigating techniques could actually reduce speed, and this increases that family's peace of mind. So how do you quantify the public policy increasing the peace of mind in the community compared to the dollars and cents? And I think these are all the things that we have to deal with and think about, and I couldn't ask for a finer group of people to hash these issues, hash these things out with, so.
Not that one, Mr. Farrell.
I was going to say, I agree with what he said. Other than that, I met with Northwest Neighborhood Association last week, and they've got some new leadership, and they're looking to get some new energy back into that section of town, and we'll probably be reaching out to other areas of town to do some fun things that have yet to be decided, so.
Thank you. Mr. Hellman?
I have nothing.
Mr. Schaefer?
Kind of already said my piece about this being the worst thing. I had some notes on it. I don't know if everybody wants those or not, because it probably isn't going to look exactly like I proposed it. But my main thing is that we structure it, and we've got results before and after, and we can get some feedback, both of this body and the two-party community safety.
I don't think I have anything other than I'll be out of town Thursday till Monday. Going to run to Florida. So,
We have a work session next Monday
yes,
night.
and I will not be here for that. My plane doesn't get in until 12:15, so I apologize. And with that, we will, for motion to be adjourned.